So, Hamish, what what led you to the weight room? Let's start with that first before we go any further.
What led me to the weight room? When I was younger, I always had this fiery drive to be better, but I always liked the idea of exercise, but I was a bit of a kid on the heavier, unfit side. I had a bit of a, dad gut at the young age of, I'd say, 10, 11, 12. And it really sucked. I'm going to be honest. It really sucked. I could not keep up with my friends on the sporting field. And I was insecure about taking my shirt off around anyone and everyone. And I hated life for it. I just hated, I was just insecure about I really was. And I remember when I was about 12, maybe, yeah, about 12, my brother was working out at a gym around here at the time. And he, for whatever reason, had to drop out of his membership, but there was still about 12 months to go left on that particular membership. And I ended up getting it because we couldn't get out of it. And I remember just walking into the weight room one day and just being absolutely astonished by what the amount of weight these guys were moving and what they were doing. And I fell in love with it. There's, what people would call the iron bug bit me. I liked it. I sure as hell did not know what I was doing at that particular stage. I just would go and watch people in the gym and just copy them. And I might it was later on when I'd start watching videos and doing my own research. But yeah, I just started on your basics like chest press, bicep curls, what else? Squat, the like. But yeah, overall, over time, I just fell in love with the adrenaline rush and the confidence boost and just everything that came with being in the gym and nutrition in general, because it just improved my mental and physical health, and I just loved it. And yeah, going from this young, insecure, overweight kid to where I am now, which I'm pretty proud of. I'm pretty proud of that fact, and I hope to, can't wait to see where else the gym will take me.
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah. So, what about you, Alex? What kind of led you into the gym, like the weight room in general?
So it's safe to say that you probably started at one end and I probably started at the opposite end. When you look at where young kids can start at, so I was probably probably the skinnier kid, but I was pretty athletic, so I was into track and field and swimming and all that sort of stuff. I think we mentioned in previous episodes about the influences of the 80s when I grew up, about the action heroes and that sort of stuff. So, well, there's a lot of bodybuilders that are influenced by Arnold and guys like that. But that's probably initially it was wanting to change, and now that I reflect on it and I've had a lot of years to think about it, it's actually what some people would call body dysmorphia. Well, actually, it is body dysmorphia, where you can look as many times as much in the mirror. You can have so many changes. You can have a 10 kilo, 20 kilo weight increase in lean muscle. You can go and drop 10 kilos of body fat. But then at the end of the day, when you look at the mirror, you still see this kind of the same person that you were when you first started. I never realized that until a long time after, because the one thing that bodybuilding actually does is that if you already have insecurities before you start and you don't recognize that, is that they're actually not going to go away. They're just going to stay with you. So yeah, I've had those same insecurities, and even now to this day, like 20 plus years later, there is still some insecurities, and what I see in the mirror compared to what other people might see when I'm walking down the street, or when I'm meeting friends, all that sort of stuff, it is different, because your own perception, you are your worst or harshest critic, I should say. So I suppose when you look at what leads to people into bodybuilding, if you think about bodybuilding, it's actually one of the most most taken sports that people do. So if you look at compared to soccer, compared to football, compared to rugby league, the fact of changing your composition of your body, and whether you're trying to get lean and ripped for a bodybuilding competition and paint yourself brown, or whether you're just trying to improve your physique to say that you feel better about yourself, then that is all bodybuilding. Whether you jump on a stage or really makes no difference. So I suppose a different way of rewording it, because not everyone necessarily associates with being that guy that's painted, guy or girl painted black or brown or whatever it is that is tanning, is the recomposition of the body to either to get fitter or to build muscle or to get stronger or to get quicker or some version of that. Whether you're CrossFit, whether you're bodybuilding, whether you're wrestling or anything like that, they all have a very similar. The biggest difference is with your other sports like soccer and football and that sort of stuff, that a soccer player has good calves because it's a byproduct of the actual sport, because they're constantly on their toes. And likewise, a rugby league player probably has bigger shoulders because they're always constantly taking impact. Now, they are doing sport-specific movements, but the difference between, if you actually look at bodybuilding as per se, if we look at competitive bodybuilding, because bodybuilding and competitive bodybuilding kind of, they should be seen at two different things, is isolating the muscles and trying to control it to make the body work as hard as possible to do a movement. So like, I don't know, to do an arm curl, if you do them strict, then you're really pinning your elbows to your body to actually get the movement up. But realistically, if you really wanted to get a 20-kilo dumbbell from down by your side up there, you just swing it up and you just go like crazy. And a representation of that could be some of the form that people see in CrossFit, for argument's sake, because they're not about necessarily their physique. Whilst they've got amazing physiques, particularly at the pro and the elite level, their body, or what their body looks like, is a byproduct of their actual sport, not the focus of it, if that makes sense. So
yeah, it does. Yeah,
it's same as like Olympic lifters. Like, don't get me wrong, Olympic lifters, powerlifters, they're all jacked, and boxers, they're all jacked.
Yeah.
They look good, this stuff, but they're not necessarily trying to get low levels of body fat, push their body weight up higher in off season, that sort of stuff. So there's to consider it
to look like an anatomy sheet, if you get what I mean. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
It's like, I'm going to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, admittedly, you might only be able to hold that conditioning for, a month in total once you're at conditioning and your hormone levels completely dried up. But it looks good on a picture. It kind of sounds silly when you put it that way. You're like, wow, you do all that just so you can look like an anime figure. But my best mates that I grew up with, we knew each other since we were 5, so 35 years now that we've known each other. They play a lot of they're called miniatures, and they're only about that big, and you paint them and you make them. I think they're made out of lead or plastic, and the different arts they used to have, same thing. They look like an anime character, except they're jacked. They got armor and all that sort of stuff. Anyway,
Did Dungeons and Dragons or something like that?
Yeah, sort of. But yeah, in the same sort of area. But with the miniatures, what they have, the game's actually called Warhammer 40,000, Warhammer 40K. Is that you make your miniatures, you make your army, and then you fight. You have your fight with your army. And I used to think, well, whilst I never got into painting, spending all that money on the models and the patience of it, I thought, well, rather than me creating or painting, because the thing is, when you're into those sort of games, you really like it because you want your army to be strong, you want it to look good, and all those sort of things. So I took it a step further. I actually skipped a step. I skipped basically buying all that stuff and playing the games. And I was like, well, I'm going to invest the time. I made a conscious decision when I was an early teenager that I'm going to create my own Space Marine. And Space Marine just, effectively looks like, you know, an anime figure or a soldier or something like that.
Yeah.
And that always stuck with me forever and a day, because whilst they were, and then there's nothing wrong with that, whilst they were playing their games and imagining that they had incredible strength and this sort of stuff, and obviously, and obviously they've got like telekinesis and they can zap to one area to the next, but it's almost like I put it in the area of like a superhero. So instead of trying to make a superhero out of clay or a metal object, I create my own superhero so that I look like my own version of Batman or my own version of Superman or that sort of thing. And then it comes out with whatever it is, rather than the other product, if that makes sense. So then I end up reaping the benefits from that. So that's kind of how that was the early stages of what happened. But the bodybuilding side of things, once they got into the competition, I've always been competitive, and I saw a young fellow in the gym, and I got a tour around the gym, and the gym trainer, he said, "Oh, see that guy over there? Look at his calves." And there was this guy who's probably like 50 years old. He's had massive calves, using calf raises. And then there's this other fellow on the other side of the gym. He maybe just competed like within a week or two. He was still tanned and everything. He pointed that guy out. He's like, yeah, he's a natural bodybuilder. I'm like, what? No way. Because I already threw away that dream years ago when I found out that I think the bubble got busted maybe late teen years, maybe early 20s, when I found out steroids were a thing. Because they weren't, unlike today, they weren't really talked about. Like, we used to have conversations in the gym. My brother and I used to play squash in this gym, and they had a sign on the wall that said creatine. It was like $10 a kilo or something. And we'd make jokes about it, that people that take creatine is basically the same thing as taking anabolic steroids, because we didn't know, you know, the internet wasn't a thing back then. So that dream of wanting to be like an Arnold Schwarzenegger got reinvigorated in 2008 for me, after a good probably 10 years of realizing that, oh, well, maybe that dream isn't necessarily, that's not going to happen. So, but yeah, that's what led me. As for other people, well, what other ways do you reckon other people would probably join?
I think other people would join because very similar to the mental state that we were both in before we started training. Because I don't know, it could be for mental health reasons, such as I want to be better. I don't know how, but I want to be better, or I want to feel better about myself. I want to feel less conscious, or maybe they just, you know, come across the sport on social media or online sometime and just go, yeah, I want to do that. I want to give that a crack. And they do like one show and that's it. But that's fine. But yeah, I think it's a lot of it would be mental health related. I personally believe that, whether that's experience influence under my own experience, but people that I've talked to, you know, I've met people in the gym. Every gym I go to, there's somewhat of, you know, a great community there. And I ask, why did you join up, or why did you start lifting? They go, oh, because I want to be better. I want to lift more. I want to have a better physique. I want to get rid of this extra fat. I want to, so on and so forth. You know, there is no particular reason. I think there's just your personal reasons, you know, and that's fine. That's more than enough to get started.
Absolutely, 100%. The one, my wife enlightened me to a different crowd of people that actually don't like going to the gym. So whilst you have all the fit nut crazy people that, you know, get a high on the endorphin rush and that sort of stuff, and the pump and this sort of thing, there is a large percentage of people that, for them, exercise and pushing themselves is actually really difficult. Now, the main reason why they may end up in a gym is because, not necessarily because they like the pump and they like what it feels like, but if they don't do it, then the effects of that come into play. So whether it's, you might go over your standard or your normal size body weight, you might have more prone to certain diseases like heart disease and things like that, and obesity. So they, in a way, for some people, they do exercise, or they build their body, or they recomposition their body because of fear of getting sick and essentially dying. So unfortunately, that's, you know, that's the motivating factor, and that's really difficult, because if you haven't yet switched in your head that this is good, I enjoy this, I like the pump, I like it, let's get it up and go. If you're going, oh, if I don't do this, you know, I'm going to get cancer, or I'm going to get unhealthy, or I'm going to get obese. If you're constantly going around in circles, that's a really tough challenge. Particularly, you know, you look at the human life expectancy of, you know, up to, if not further than 100 years. If you've started going through that when you're a kid, that you're like, I have to do exercise, I can't keep my weight down, then it's kind of like a balancing effect. How much effort am I willing to put into the effects that I'm willing to get, or how much do I want to change myself? If I'm like, yeah, I couldn't be bothered, then the results speak for themselves. The one thing that I do like about bodybuilding is that it's honest.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is if you are really into it and it does take over your life, well, it probably shows.
No.
And if it doesn't, well, it probably doesn't show. And that's nothing to say, you know, and it's really, even regardless of which side of the fence you sit on, whether you're, you know, anti or, you know, opposite of for anabolic steroids and that sort of stuff, regardless of the fact, you still have to work your ass off. So, you know, it makes no difference. At the end of the day, you have to put in the work to get the effort. Whether you want to be symmetrical, whether you want to be big up top, big down the bottom, just big arms, big trot, whatever, it actually really doesn't make a difference. It will make a difference on a competitive stage, but
yeah, true.
You know, for the sake of recomposition or just looking good in a t-shirt, you know, why not just train the bench muscles? You know, like, why, if you can hide the legs with tracky dacks and you're not flexing them, then, you know, more power to you. It doesn't really matter. You know, so unless you want to be on a competitive stage, well, you know, there's a reason why you're going to get marked down a couple of points, because they're going to look at certain things. But if that's not part of your repertoire, then it actually doesn't really matter in that respect. You know, minus the fact of balancing muscle groups and all that sort of stuff. But, yeah.
But now here's a question that I've always wanted to ask. What led you from being in the gym and lifting weights and for that healthy lifestyle to competing? You know, what caused you to compete and get up on stage?
So throughout that whole time, there's always been a fair amount of insecurity. So all the way through, from young teenage years all the way to early to mid 20s, and as I got into my 30s, it probably got less and less because there was a realization. So that changed. The competitive spirit's always been there. It's just that I've put it towards something different at each decade of life, or every 5 years. So once I found that natural bodybuilding was a thing, and it was a thing in 2008 and 2009, it was just started to become a thing probably in the early 2000s. So once I realized that I could, you know, do okay, and that it was something I could sink my teeth in, whether that meant I was competitive or not, well, that's a different story. But in my eyes, like, at the end of the day, I could create the best version of myself. And even though at certain points of that road, because the thing is, when you're competitive, you're like, yeah, I want to come first, I want to come first, I want to come first. The only problem is, if you never come first and you try doing that 5 or 6 times, or 3 times, or even 2 times, then you question yourself, why the hell am I bothered doing that? So that's why to stay in the industry, there has to be more than the fact that you're coming first, because I've never come first. I might have medals on the wall, but I've never come first. So I've come close. I've still never come first. So there's a bit more to it. It's more about, if you look at all the things that you can possibly do in your life, whether things that are hard. Now, because I've put myself in on purpose, I've put myself in places of discomfort, e.g., eating limited calories, training when you're in limited calories, and doing the day in, day out sort of things, functioning around other people, trying to have a conversation. That's a conscious choice of myself. But knowing that I can do that and do it more than once, and then each time I do it improving, then that allows a lot stronger mental resilience to do other things. Like I just helped my parents move house. I loaded 2 shipping containers to do it. They could have hired someone, but that is what it is. But at the end of the day, I had the mental resilience to push myself enough to go and load every single box with the assistance of my 2 siblings as well. But I did most of the heavy lifting because, one, I'm the youngest and I'm the fittest and the strongest. But fortunately, bodybuilding kind of helped in that respect.
That's one of the negative side effects of being a bodybuilder and a lifter. Whenever someone has heavy lifting to do, they'll be like, "Oh, you lift weights, don't you?"
100%. Yeah.
Like, I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Great. Yeah, I'm basically now a full-time labourer, so I'm like, oh man. So, but yeah, to answer that question, there's always been insecurity that's driven it over the years, and as I've gotten older, my reason why I kept continuing has, for the insecurity sense, there's always a certain amount of insecurity in there, but it's gotten smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. I've become more secure in myself, more comfortable in myself, and hopefully I've come to a better point in terms of psychologically, in terms of that, things that I can change in as well, because at the end of the day, you do get to a certain limit, and I suppose we'll talk about this when we talk to genetics, of limit to where that comes to.
Yeah, but wow. I mean, overall, when it comes to the idea of being competitive, when it comes to me, I do want to get on stage one day, but I know that's a lot of work, and will have an impact on my family as much as it will myself. But I think the whole reason when I get up on stage is just to show off my physique, because let's be honest, like, you work for so long to get this physique for yourself, but it feels nice to show it off, to other people sometime on stage and, get appreciated for it. Whether I come first or last, I really, at this point in time, I really don't care. I just care that I've come from this, insecure, overweight kid to being up on stage with my shirt off, with everything showing the physique, and not only a passion but a lifestyle, but showing this thing that I love to do, and just that I'm that secure in myself. That's the big selling point for me personally. But yeah, just that might change later on down the road, and that's fine. But yeah, see what happens.
Awesome. It's all about creating those milestones for yourself, because once you conquer that milestone, you'll be like, you either love it or you're going to hate it. Hopefully you'll love it.
I reckon there's going to be times when I both love it and hate it, but
100%. That's going to be there. That's like that with everything. But once you make that milestone, then you'll be like, well, maybe next time I could be bigger, or I could be leaner, or I could
I need a box.
All these other things. This is after you gain 10, 20 kilos after it, and then you're like, actually, I want to do that again. Or it scares you off, and you go, hell no, I'm not doing that again. That sucks. I'm gonna do me, and I'm gonna eat food. I'm gonna cut weight. So
yeah. Well, and I think this is probably to do linking into mental health and bodybuilding, but the idea of bulking, when it came up to me, I'm gonna be honest, it scared me, because one thing that I promised myself when I started lifting weights, I started just doing exercise, just being healthy, is I'd never go back to what I was back, being unfit, being unhealthy. And when I came into your office one day and you said, so with bulking, and I researched this more online, you got to actually gain weight and eat more calories than your body actually needs, and you're going to gain weight. And I'm like, I kind of don't want to, but yeah, it's one of those things. But once you get on the cut, I know it'll be worth it. But it's one of those mental barriers that you have to overcome. But see what happens as we go. But yeah, just going well so far.
The mental health definitely is something that will have its toll, because, as I said before, if you already walk into the bodybuilding journey with certain things that whether it's gaining weight, whether it's losing weight, whether it's you want to stay at a certain body fat level, then that will play on itself. And then depending on if you diet, for argument's sake, or if you increase weight, then that'll actually it'll play out itself. Like when you're in a depleted state, the things in terms of mental health, they get amplified. So, if you go through a decade and you've just realized that, okay, well, I wasn't happy with my physical body and now I am, and it's okay and it's all good. And then first time you go and cut weight for like 3 months, then all of a sudden everything sometimes, not always, sometimes all the work that you did to get you into a better state of mind, and you're like, hang on, I experienced this 10 years ago. Now it's come back to haunt me. What the hell? So, and that's quite prevalent as well, because that can happen. Like you're like, well, I dealt with this a decade ago, and now I have to deal with this again. But really, what that is the body gets to an uncomfortable state, whether it's too heavy or it's too lean, and it goes back to almost, when you reboot your computer and you put it on its default settings. Your body has its own certain amount of default settings, like things that you train it out of. It could be, whether it's, a really good one for most people is talking in front of people. If you naturally teach yourself how to talk in front of people, and then all of a sudden you're put into that position, and then it's like you've gone back in a time zone. You're like, what? Now I feel self-conscious about it. I'm like, oh my God, and then you go through all these other things. I thought I worked through this. But the same thing happens with weight loss and weight gain, is that it can bring back those certain issues. Noting that if you can put them into context when you're going there. So I suppose the biggest thing with like a novice or an early time bodybuilder such as yourself would be to do, rather than try dieting for 6 months and go, you know what? You go to me, all right, Alex, let's drop the hammer. We're going to cut weight like crazy. We're going to get ready for season B. And like, okay, 6 months. Well, that would be informed of me to let you do that without actually having some test runs in the first place to see how you psychologically go on eating less food. And so rather than dieting for 6 months to see where that crashing point is, well, then we might diet you for 4 weeks. You might do some, over in a 5-year period, you might have maybe 2 or 3 instances where you might have a month or a month and a half that you actually decide to, okay, I'm going to aim to drop 10 kilos, or I'm going to aim to drop 8 kilos. And it's not necessarily for the purpose of, let's see what you look like. Well, it is actually to a certain extent, but actually for the purpose of going through and watching that process and experience what it feels like for the body to be deprived, to train in a deficit and to function. Now, it's not going to be a big deficit, and the more body fat you have on you, if you've got a certain amount of body fat, that's okay. That will make you feel okay, but it just gives you it's like a test sample of, okay, all right, okay, now I know what this uncomfortable feeling looks like. Okay, well, it's probably going to get a little bit more, but the more times you taste what that uncomfortable feeling tastes like, just like anything, you're like, oh, okay, well, I dropped 10 kilos in a couple of months. Oh, maybe I could, maybe I could drop 15 or something in a double amount of time frame, or whatever it is. But getting used to that is no different to training your body to improving on bench press. It's just a practice, sets and reps. You go, okay, well, I'm going to practice eating bugger all, and I'm going to get good at it, and I'm going to stay conscious that I'm not going to flip my lid, and I'm going to keep my cool. So
yeah,
that's a big thing, is that mental health and keeping that into check, and to even keeping that into check, it's the people around you that will notice it the most. When you're in that zone, the awareness that you have is actually gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. But then everyone around you, unfortunately, if the awareness is completely gone, then they end up suffering for whatever decisions you can make. Not to scare you off too much, but you know what I mean? Like, for argument's sake, having a short fuse. If you already have a short fuse, well, you're going to have an even shorter fuse when you're dieting. So it's something to be mindful of, and it's things that you can coach yourself and train yourself to improve. So they're all things out there.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, low level amounts of body fat and not eating as much as you would like to mentally, and being on that strict diet, and while maintaining a consistent training regime, it'll mess with your psyche, but it will mess with like your sleeping schedule, which will, I'm sure there's lots of science to back it up, but and that leads you to lashing out to people, well, sometimes, but and kind of like
Absolutely.
But I guess
when you think about it, if you get limited sleep, just even when you're well fed, and you get a couple of days of that, and just say you wake up at 3 a.m. when you normally wake up at 6, all of a sudden you're tired, you're lethargic, you're not firing as quickly as possible or as normal. You might be a bit more irritable. Your response time might be slower. Your performance in the gym. This is just based on I'm eating in a surplus and I'm getting bugger all sleep, or I'm getting less sleep. So they're all little. You would have experienced all of the snippets. So, but yeah, they're definitely there. They just may get amplified.